And welcome back to Capitol Tonight. While PEF's leadership tries to convince union members to vote yes on the revised contract, one faction is offering up an argument for voting no. PEF Proud spoke out against the terms of the first draft of the contract, which, as you know, was eventually rejected by the rank and file. They're also opposed to the second version and particularly to the way the governor has handled the negotiations. Joining me are two members of PEF Proud. Andrew Coates is on my right, and then across the table we have Wayne Baer. Thank you both for coming back. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Liz.
So there are two things that are going on here. One is the nuts and bolts, like the nitty-gritty of the contract, where you size it up and say, we like this and we don't like that, specifics. And then the other is the overarching theme of the approach by the governor. So let's briefly deal with one and then briefly deal with the other. So you still think that this contract is unfair as it stands now?
Well, we believe it's only incrementally changed from the first tentative agreement that was rejected by the membership. It still has furloughs in there, 9 days of furloughs. Mm-hmm. It still has 3 years of 0% increase.
But you do get some of the money back from the furloughs, right? Don't you?
You do later on.
Okay, later, right.
That's correct. But at different levels of cost. It's not a dollar for dollar always exchange.
Got it.
The other thing, the big concern to a lot of our membership is the huge increases in the health insurance costs, particularly since if you look at it compared to just maybe Walmart or some mom and pop business, the percentage that state employees pay is fairly reasonable. But if you look at it to some of the private sector, it's fairly comparable. And to go to the significant increases that he's doing now, we think is, quite unnecessary and too extreme.
But some would be acceptable to you? Would you be able to...
Well, overall, it's a concession contract. There are major give-backs overall.
Yep.
Included in this latest quote-unquote tweak was giving away education funds. I think the figure is $17 million.
See, now Ken Brennan says that's not true.
Well, what it means is that there will be no funding for Article 15.3 education support.
I have no idea what that means.
In the contract, it's zeroed out in the beginning of the contract. At the end of the contract, it's brought back.
I see.
But it's a way to make an immediate concession in exchange for example, the furloughs being paid instead of unpaid.
I see.
So
what does that pay for, that education piece that you're speaking of?
Well, many of our members have gotten master's degrees, have advanced their careers, have become, if you're going to have a State Department of Education, a State Education Department, you need to have experts in education, and so they've become graduate-trained experts in education.
And more valuable, arguably, as an employee to the state going forward, right? I mean,
yes.
Is that the argument here?
It
and
is
also enabling them to keep up with changes in the industry.
Right. And I think that it's those kinds of things that really tell the story of what's happened to PEF, because matched for age, gender, and education, public employees are paid worse than private sector employees.
But they get better benefits, generally speaking.
No, wages and benefits for someone with my education in the private sector are much better than the private.
Okay, let me ask you something without you getting offended. Okay,
please.
Are you agree? Why don't you work in the private sector?
I have worked in the private sector.
Okay.
I took this role. I actually took a 40% pay and benefit cut because I could serve people who are very vulnerable. I'm a physician. I work with a population of patients who often are really at the fringe of safety in our society, and the chance to work with that population is very important to me. I believe in public service.
Do you think that the many members of PEF feel similarly, that because a lot of people who are PEF members, it's not a hit against the SEA, but you're talking about folks who are white collar largely, can perhaps be more marketable in the private sector, but when they make that choice, they also know what comes with it, which is that you have this kind of ugly thing that is going on between you guys and the administration, or any administration, not just this one, right?
Well, this is fairly recent, though. There hasn't always been this acrimonious degree of relationships between our union and the governors.
Well, wait, you didn't get along with Pataki also terribly well.
Correct, but not. I said degree.
Oh, I see.
The degree
I'm sorry.
of this is far more severe than almost any previous governor. Perhaps with what his father did in the first month when he took office, when he announced potentially 13,000 reductions, which subsequently was reduced quite a bit. But Initially, it was over 13,000.
When you guys, this particular, I think it's a flyer or a publication that PEF Proud has put out, which is not, I should just stress, not just you guys. Obviously, there are other people. You happen to be the representatives, and I appreciate you coming in. There's sort of an argument that the governor didn't need to go this route, that he knew coming in that he wanted to do this, and then subsequently he did, right? So you're saying in some ways it's an engineered.
Well, the governor said to the public employee unions as a whole that public employees owed New York State $450 million in givebacks this year.
Well, not just the governor, also the legislature.
And put it into legislature.
Right.
But we know that the tax on New York's wealthiest that will expire at the end of 2011 would have brought in an extra $1 billion in revenue in this fiscal year. That's twice as much as was demanded from the public employees. And we know that if that tax stayed in effect for the following fiscal year, that's $5 billion more in revenue. That's 10 times, that's more than 10 times what the demand was for the concessions. So when you think about what was possible in terms of revenue, there was no need for this demand for concessions in the beginning.
Except that the governor argues that it makes New York less business friendly, and that businesses in the private sector is where the growth is going to occur. I mean, as you guys know, and that's part of your beef actually, or was originally, and I think still is that there is no protection going forward from government consolidation layoffs. There's no hard and fast. There's a side letter, as it's known, and that is negotiable or arbitrable or whatever it is that the correct union language is. But you can, it has legal weight, I think. Is that right? It does have legal weight.
That's what our professional staff that works for PEF argue, and some of the attorneys, some of them with a fair amount of experience. If a layperson looks at that language, that memo from Howard Glazer, excuse me, that went to agency heads and essentially said there was 2 years of layoff protection.
Right.
It's not immediately obvious. But in any case, if it is what PEF contends and the staff contends, when it say it's arbitrable, that still has to go before an arbitrator, and you could win or lose on that.
Right.
And that could be a couple of years down the road.
But it's more than you had in the first contract.
Well, the actual
yes.
contract language from first to second on the question of layoffs did not change by a word. It's exactly the same contract language. There was a side letter added, but the part of that language that gets my attention is that it protects the governor's right or ability to do layoffs if the Sage Commission, for example, that process, whatever the end game of that process is, the Sage Commission is mentioned in our contract as being a reason for layoffs.
Well, that is the whole point of the Sage Commission, isn't it? I mean, the downsizing of government is the whole point
here.
No,
but the cruel irony is that when public jobs are privatized, it costs the taxpayers more, and the quality of the services declines.
Is this the outside contractor argument?
Absolutely. The governor's own data, the governor's office own data shows that privatizing public jobs costs the taxpayers more money.
Okay, I do. So one of the things here that I think is fascinating is voting no makes us even stronger in this fight. In addition, we have to work to put the entire bargaining unit in the strongest possible position for all future negotiations. Now, again, remember, under this second contract that is right now in the field that people are going to be voting on, it's 4 years and not 5, so you would be back to the table a little bit earlier, right? Except, again, you're basically saying we want to strengthen the bargaining position of the union going forward at the expense of 3,500 people.
Well, if I could vote against layoffs, I would vote against layoffs. But PEF does not hire. PEF does not fire for the state. Only the governor has the power to do layoffs. And so the governor basically took 3,496 PEF families and held them hostage, and then told the union, go negotiate against yourself. Give me concessions. I've got these hostages. And then for the governor to turn around and say, if you don't give me the concessions, I'm going to hurt the hostages. It's up to you. That shows profound contempt for the PEF membership. That is a bullying stance of bargaining. And I'm sorry, but never mind the no voters. Never mind the yes voters. PEF members have gotten that message. You know, Machiavelli warned the prince that it's better to be feared than loved. But Machiavelli also warned the prince not to be hated.
Okay, we're almost out of time. So let me just ask you this. Do you believe, what do you believe is going to happen on November 3rd? Do you have any feeling?
Well, if there was more time, there might be a better chance to reject this agreement as well. Some of us suspect, at least arguably, that there was a concerted effort on the part of the governor and PEF administration to have a this ratification vote fairly close. So they were very prepared, as I think you had on your blog earlier today, about the massive effort that PEF has
And they
put
have
out.
received assistance from AFT and SEIU and some of the larger unions. I have spoken to them about
I have a
that.
slightly different view here. I think one of the things that's wonderful to see is the PEF leadership reaching out to the PEF membership and really trying to mobilize the PEF membership. Whatever they're trying to mobilize them for, I'm really glad to see it. The other thing is that I don't think that our particular effort carries almost any weight at all. Although, thousands of people are now looking at our stuff. I think the PEF members are the kind of people who make up their mind for themselves.
And we're going to leave it there on this positive note. Thank you very much, Andrew. I appreciate that. And Wayne, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Obviously, we're following the story, but it's good to get both sides, so I appreciate that.
You're quite welcome.